funding internet really.
Were you logged out?
Oh, because I was talking to her.
Yeah, she.
Yeah, so what happened? So what happened is usually it goes to PD every year. They hear public testimony and policy.
So that was
This year, what's your
and then it went to a single.
I heard Jordan was telling me about it.
Yeah, he came in and he was a
Yeah.
Appropriations?
Yes. Who manages it?
Oh, Bill,
Yeah.
so the bills coming up. Okay, so. And you can, this room, and then they'll take public testimony.
I wonder if it's just
Budget and that's all as well.
My view doesn't work. I have to put it here because it has been.
You're not the speaker, but it's back to the intention of it. It's gotta be election, or they're gonna just make you see if you can.
You wouldn't have that problem.
We're
So I was saying how when Yonkers was talking about Yonkers was talking about cell phone service.
So basically, federal government spent $150 million on this and walked away. You can get that yourself. Good morning.
How they're partnering with
Department of Action said, my field is slightly straight up. We got people saying, so he didn't really do it, and then don't put him in chip ed position where they have to protect.
There's somebody from Longwood, Emily O'Brien.
You should have let her go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We need 5.
Hey, I was making a cup of coffee in my office. You put one of those creamers in it, go down to 300 to
Oh, there it is.
It's the angle cheese.
No, I said I was making a cup of coffee in my office. Put one of those creamers in and I haven't bring it out to my conference room where I'm meeting with. That's what it's all right. I was counting Michael.
I need one. I'll vote one person.
2 minutes till 10.
Yeah, I was counting Michael.
Tyler.
Where's Cliff?
Where's Hayes? Yeah, I don't know. Chairman's in the chairman had a lot of people want to see him, so.
Where's Cliff Hayes? Let's see if I can round him up. Hey, where are you?
Walking out the door.
There we go.
the agenda is House Bill 763. It's Chairman Jones's bill. It creates the revenue reserve fund, the new reserve fund that's included in the budget, was created in the budget last year and further funded this year. The legislation states that any year where there is not a required deposit into the revenue stabilization fund, there shall be a deposit into the revenue reserve fund equal to any excess revenues above and beyond what was assumed in the budget and that was not committed for other purposes, up to 1% of the total general fund revenue for the year, so it shouldn't exceed that. Legislation also states that the total amount in the revenue reserve fund should not exceed 2% of the general fund revenue from the prior year. It also includes language saying that the general assembly can access the fund whenever there is a general fund reforecast, a decrease in revenues less than 2%. 2% revenue for decrease is the trigger for the rainy day fund. So what this says is if the revenue goes down but less than what is required to trigger a rainy day fund withdrawal, you can access the revenue reserve. And there's also a second enactment clause that states that it is the intent of the General Assembly to fully fund the revenue reserve within 6 years. Again, and the fully funded revenue reserve would be 2% of the annual general fund revenues for the prior year. There's no fiscal impact from the bill because all of the House Bill 29 and 30 already assumed deposits into the revenue reserve. House Bill, last year's budget included $30 million for the revenue reserve. House Bill 29 includes an additional $121 million for the revenue reserve. And House Bill 30 includes $270 million for the revenue reserve. And these would all bring up the total to the revenue reserve to about $427 million, which is equal to 1.2% maximum.
Okay, so we need to entertain a motion to report. Second. It's moved and seconded that we report. Let us cast our votes, please.
I'm on stage. Well,
let's see. Doesn't look like it's
coming up.
Do it that way.
We're gonna do it manually. All those in favor of the motion, please. Vote sign. Got it? Got it? Not yet. All in favor of the motion, please. Vote sign by hand, please. All voting in the front. Thank you. Okay, Tony.
Mr. Chairman, the next bill is House Bill 769. This is the 6-year plan, the 6-year capital outlay plan bill. The chairman has asked for 2 line amendments. The first line amendment would be on page 1 of the bill, on line 50, is a correction to the cost category for the Virginia State project. So we would strike 25,000,001, replace that with 75,000,001. Then on line 51, strike 50 million and insert 100 million. That's amendment number 1. Amendment number 2 would be to on page 2 to strike lines 99 through 100.
All right. Need a motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Move the amendments. All those in favor, use vote sign aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, all in the front.
And the bill is as amended.
The bill as amended, let us take a vote on that. All those, may I have a motion, please?
Move to report. Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we report the bill. All those in favor, please use vote sign aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, all in the affirmative, John.
Got it, thank you.
The third bill on the agenda is House Bill 1468, the chairman's bill related to the auditor of public accounts. I gave you a written summary of the bill. There's 16 sections of the code that this amends. What it does is these 16 sections these are 16 smaller areas of the state budget that by code are required, the auditor of public accounts is required to audit them annually. And what this does is strike out the requirement to audit them annually and allow them to states that it shall be audited as determined necessary by the auditor of public accounts. What this is intended to do is to free up resources for the auditor of public accounts to sort of target their audits to bigger areas that pose a greater financial risk to the Commonwealth. The auditor of public accounts is here, Martha, if y'all have any questions for her. But on this list, on your sheet is the list of the 16 current audits that are required to be done annually that would no longer be required to be done annually based on this legislation.
Go to report.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yes.
How many annual audits are being done now? How many annual audits are you doing now?
We do an annual audit of the Commonwealth's financial statements, and then of all of the colleges and universities, and of all the activities like lottery, ABC that are done to make profits. But most of the other state agencies, it's not a financial statement audit, and so we assess them by risk and try to do the riskier ones. Now, when we're doing the Commonwealth's financial statements, all your big agencies, tax, social services, health, corrections, we're having to do certain work there in order to feed the financial statements of the Commonwealth. So there's a lot that we're doing annually. These are just some of the smaller ones that take time away. An example that we don't have to do annually is state police. They have a $375 million budget, and I can't always get there because of some of these little things that have less than a couple of $1 million a year. So this is just to try to let me use risk in assessing what I do each year.
Do you have like a total number that your office does each year of audits statewide?
We probably issue, other than courts, Mr. Chairman, we probably issue maybe 100, 120 other audit reports. Now, and we also do all the courts, and so you got 3 of those for each locality, and then the sheriffs and treasurers and all that. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Move to report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we report. All those in favor of the motion, please vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Is it all work? Is it yours not working?
Mine is not working.
Mr. Chairman, report is amended.
Report is
There's no amendment.
Oh, that was the last
one.
Okay, sorry. Got it.
Mine is not working, John.
Not working.
Okay.
We got it.
Got it?
Unanimous.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, we done with that?
Yes, sir.
General Williams, thank you so very much, sir, for last week, for being with us and your patience. We appreciate it so very much, and thank you for your willingness to come back and be with us today. And you have the microphone, sir.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend time with you today. My team has placed a couple of items on your in front of you. One is the briefing I'm going to go through very quickly so we can get to the point where we can do questions and answers. The other one is this document, already turned to page 12. This is a budget report that we were tasked to produce in 2016 that lays out our path from 2016 to 2025. So good information in that. I would tell you that that is our playbook. Everything that we push forward in the administration is based upon that document that you asked us to produce. This is the agenda I'm going to follow. I'm just going to quickly review our budget report. Give you a quick snapshot of a current year update. And probably something that you rarely get is an opportunity to see what success is. And we are hitting some great projects and meeting with good success. Lastly, I'll wrap up with what I had briefed last year, the Reserve Center Transformation Master Plan. That's a big acronym there, and I apologize for that. I like to start off every opportunity just to paint the picture of the force. We're 7,500 soldiers, 1,200 airmen, 400 Defense Force personnel. Of that force, 1,500 of those are full-time personnel, predominantly federal, active guard and reserve, or military technicians. Bottom left, and why we're all here doing what we do. We support our nation and our Commonwealth. Since September 11th, we've mobilized over 15,000 soldiers and airmen supporting global operations. And then in that same period of time, we've mobilized over 8,000 soldiers and airmen to support the Commonwealth during periods of emergency service, as recently seen by the snowstorm and then before that in Charlottesville. So new budget items. In the governor's budget, we had 3 items that we were put in for: $3 million in bond money as a match for federal funds, and I'll touch this in just a second. We also have in there 3 general fund positions to augment emergency response capabilities. That's predominantly there to offset the loss of our active guard and reserve and our military technicians due to reductions across the Department of Defense. And then lastly, $100,000 to support cyber assessments across the Commonwealth. That's a phenomenal program. It's gotten a lot of press. I would just caution folks, every opportunity I have to do this, I like to throw this out. $100,000, that's a substantial amount of money, but it is nearly, frankly, just scratching the surface in terms of our concerns when it comes to cyber and cybersecurity. So what we've accomplished. This is part of the good news story. We've locked in $22.5 million in federal military construction for Roanoke through FY22. Additionally, we've locked in $15 million for federal military construction for our cyber formations at Fort Belvoir. And let me paint a little bit of a broader picture. Over the last 4 years, we have worked processes so that we've received $74 million in military construction money. That cost the Commonwealth roughly $6 million. That's well over a 1,200% return on your investment. Guiding principle is, you can see it right there, we have to continue improving our infrastructure so that we can maximize or minimize, that is, the risk of losing Army and Air Force units to other states in the region. That is a very real threat. So what does success look like? Probably my favorite one, the Roanoke Regional Readiness Center. Actually, in Botetourt, we took over the Botetourt Correctional Facility at no cost, and then immediately launched into a renovation and military construction project that will span multiple years. Allow us to close a couple of armories that were in the wrong location and severely out of date, and begin consolidating in a regional facility. So it saves money in the long haul and gets us back into the Roanoke market where we truly needed to be. So this is the $22.5 million. Phenomenal effort here. The next part, maintenance reserve plus-ups. $950,000 got us a $2 million input from the federal government. Why that's important is to try to make some forward movement and updating, renovating, or just taking care of our facilities. And you can see some of the pictures that highlight that. Why this is important really goes to the next chart. I know that's an eye chart, and you need a magnifying glass to read through that. So let me just sum it up in a couple of points. We are predominantly, when it comes to our facilities, a post-World War II structure. Most of our facilities were built right after World War II. So the average age is well over 50 years old. And since that time period, the Commonwealth has changed. So in some cases, we're in the wrong location. And then we're over 50% short of space based upon what we're authorized. What does that mean in real numbers? That's roughly 1.2 million square feet short of what we need to sustain our operations. This is predominantly a federal issue, but it will require assistance from the Commonwealth as we move into that realm and we start to work this hard across our facility footprint. this just highlights it one more time. The red, amber, green, which you don't see a lot of, and black, each of those is where we have an armory sited. And suffice it to say, red and black is bad, and yellow is marginal. So that right there tells a picture by geographic location. We have a lot of work ahead of us. And let me just underscore that this is a federal issue predominantly. We are not the only state that's facing challenges, but what we're trying to do is be the most aggressive state in how we get after this and compete to get those federal resources to the Commonwealth. So, subject to your questions, that is our story. While we have a daunting task in front of us, from my perspective, this is a good news story. The return on investment, the things that we're doing to fight to get the resources to bring it back to the Commonwealth, I think says it all.
Yes, sir. Govt.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, stuck in another committee and everything, and I may have missed some of the general's comments, but aviation is kind of close to me, and I think that we may have a leverage in there where I believe we might be able to put in a $4.5 million to leverage, maybe like 89 million for some of our air unit. If you didn't go into it, could you tell us quickly about that, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate the question. The delegate is absolutely correct. One of our biggest challenges is our Army Aviation Support Facility that's sited at Richmond International Airport. It is, it's been there just after World War II on $1 a year lease. That lease runs out in 2032, and then it goes to $2.3 million a year that would have to come out of our budget. And frankly, the federal regulations prohibit us from renting a facility. So we're in a tight squeeze. 2032 is a long time out there. But in terms of the Department of Defense, that's tomorrow. And so what we're trying to do, working very closely with our congressional delegation, is to get the $89 million of military construction funding lined up. And it's looking very good, frankly. But what that does entail is an investment by the Commonwealth of $4.5 million to prepare the land and make sure that we can use that $89 million to build just runway, hangars, all the maintenance requirements that it takes to maintain the aircraft. The so what of this is, if we don't do it, we're going to lose a facility. We won't have a place to site the helicopters. And then, frankly, the Army will have to make some pretty hard decisions about pulling those helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft away from us. That means we are in jeopardy of losing 27 helicopters and 1 Beechcraft airplane. That is an extraordinarily high-end and valuable asset to the Commonwealth. All you have to do is look at the news. In fact, our aviators were down at Hurricane Harvey supporting Texas, the recent snowstorms. And you see that over and over again. It's probably our most visible asset when we go out to support the state. I do have great concern that we need to get on this. Again, 2032 looks like a long time away, but when you start developing the FIDEP and the POM within the Department of Defense, that's right on us. Yeah. And I'd like to underscore as well, that was a part, a key element of that analysis that we did for the General Assembly 2 years ago, and continues to be our #1 priority, certainly, but our #1 talking point in terms of taking care of what assets we have in the state. There's nothing more important than this, in my opinion. If I had to trade things, I would trade it all to make sure we didn't lose 27. So subject to questions, sir, thank you so much for that opportunity.
Any other questions from the committee? General Williams, thank you so very much, sir. We certainly appreciate you coming.
And thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your report. Thank you. Okay, at this time we're going to entertain budget amendments, and we have up first Delegate Wilt. Okay. Delegate Klein. Delegate Davis. Well, I see Delegate Ferris coming in, so go to the mic, sir.
Yes, sir. Tell you what, this is just really good timing. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, what my bill is, what my amendment is intended to do is to allow the Department of Conservation and Recreation to buy or acquire land that adjoins them. And Nikki Rosner's here to talk about this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm Nikki Rosner with the Nature Conservancy. We worked with Delegate Ferris on these amendments. The two amendments that are before your subcommittee are companions to an amendment in the Natural Resources Subcommittee. That amendment in the Natural Resources Subcommittee seeks to loosen the restrictions on the ability of the Department of Conservation and Recreation to acquire land. Not eliminate those restrictions, but loosen the restrictions. Because right now, what the budget does is, it says that the agency cannot use non-general funds to acquire land for any property unless those properties are listed in the budget. And those lists are in the capital part of the budget, so that's what's before you. What we've proposed is that DCR should report to the General Assembly on all land acquisitions to maintain that accountability that you all are seeking. However, what we would like to see is DCR only needs prior approval for acquiring new state parks, because it's the state parks that represent a really significant financial obligation on the part of the Commonwealth to then start spending money on infrastructure so that the parks can be used. I mean, those are significant, and the General Assembly should decide whether there are going to be new state parks. But our contention is acquisitions where we're adding land to state parks and where we're adding land to natural area preserves and also acquiring new natural area preserves, they don't represent as significant a financial obligation on the part of the Commonwealth, because those lands often don't need more infrastructure. They're just making the park easier to manage, or they're adding land that is next to a water body or something else desirable. The last thing that I will say is DCR has worked with the Nature Conservancy to acquire land for parks and natural area preserves for decades. And this sort of restriction did not appear in the budget until the last year or two. And you know, some land acquisitions take years. Some of them have to be done very quickly. When you have a willing landowner that's willing to act, sometimes you need to be able to jump in and act. So we're not trying to remove accountability, but we are trying to remove what we view as language that is so restrictive as to tie the agency's hands. And we hope that you will favorably consider this proposal. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here for any questions, but Ms. Rosner will certainly be able to answer that. I just understand the need, especially for land that already adjoins property, to be able to, for the department to be able to acquire that land before a land baron, like one of the committee members over there comes in and scoops it up. I see him looking at Mr. Ingram. He might buy it and within that year's time, you know, it's just really restrict them to have to wait a year to buy a piece of property, and somebody who wants to sell only wants to go ahead and get that transaction done.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think we have a representative here who will speak on behalf of Delegate Edmonds.
the Environmental Health and Safety and Facilities Annex Building. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Okay, all right, thank you. Let me go through my list one more time. Delegate Wilt, Delegate Klein, Delegate Davis, Delegate Leftwich, Delegate King, Delegate LaRock. Okay, that's it. We are done with our business for today, and committee is yours.
Thank you.